Carolina Brigade's going to move on to the field, and on this part of the field, the 2nd South Carolina Infantry. And here in just a moment, we'll hear some of their stories about their arrival here on the battlefield and their move across the field itself. Now, one thing you may also notice, the color of most of their clothing is not what you normally expect. That's one of the things that's going to be kind of a story of itself for Longstreet's Corps on the battlefield. Robert E. Lee's art, we always think Confederate uniform, there's no such thing. It depended on army to army, from year to year, month to month. And they're going to cause a little confusion here on the battlefield with their uniforms.
How's everybody doing?
Good.
Give me a minute, catch my breath here. Steeper than it looks. My name is Patrick Farringer. We're representing 2nd South Carolina, as Lee has probably explained a little bit, provided a little bit of background at this point as to where they fought and what they were doing here. What we have for you today is kind of an in their footsteps presentation of their multiple assaults on Snodgrass Hill. So the 2nd South Carolina, as you can tell by their appearance, they weren't your typical Western Federals. They were actually part of the Army of Northern Virginia and were brought down with Longstreet's Corps to help out in the West. They came down by train and on rail through to Ringgold Depot. And one interesting story about their trip down, they had to offload at one point along the way, and it was unusually cold evenings for the time of year. So they had stopped near a turpentine factory, and the men started lighting barrels of resin on fire to keep warm. Well, they got the order to load back up. Trains were getting ready to head out, come down, for the impending battle, which had already actually begun that day. And the fire got a little out of hand, ended up burning down the entire turpentine factory. And there are accounts of the men of the 2nd South Carolina laughing and carrying on, thinking it was a big joke. It wasn't a joke to their brigade commander Kershaw, who reprimanded several of them afterwards for it. But kind of goes to show that the personal side of these men, even with what's coming, they're still joking, cutting up over something like obviously starting a massive fire. They arrived late on the 18th into the 19th. And were just then issued full boxes of ammunition. Upon getting their ammunition, they started a march in the dark towards the fighting. Along the way, there's multiple accounts of being so dark and so thick, and men so tired they were falling, getting bruised, cut up, broken bones. And they arrived and bivouacked down that way, starting on the 20th of September. Forming up, they would have formed up in the corner of the field down there, Dyer Field, and a quote from David Augustus Dickert of the 2nd described that morning the sunrise as of unusual splendor, casting its rays and shadow in sparkling brilliancy across the mountains and plains of northern Georgia. So they wake up in the morning with a beautiful sunrise, much like we had today, getting ready to march to their fate.
Morning, folks.
Good morning.
How are y'all?
Good.
Good. As Sergeant Farringer stated, the 2nd South Carolina was part of General Robert E. Lee's Army of Northern Virginia. General Longstreet, for some time, had been begging Lee for his own independent command. Lee, knowing that General Bragg was struggling in the West with numbers, finally granted him his wish and sent Longstreet's entire corps, approximately 23,000 men, from Orange County, Virginia, down to Ringgold, Georgia. One of the big differences that the men of Longstreet's Corps were going to face was the type of enemy. These Western Yankees were an entirely different breed. From the Longstreet's history, the regimental history, they stated Longstreet's men had heard about these Western Yankees. They're a much different type of animal, much more like a tiger.
One of Hood's men said to the South Carolinians as they're passing them, press them, boys, press them, and they will fall as quickly as the Yankees in Virginia. And unfortunately, I believe they are a bit mistaken as to the tenacity of the enemy in this particular engagement.
Lieutenant Colonel Gillard of the 2nd South Carolina is quoted as saying during the fight in Dyer Field, "Let us get behind those fellows up there and capture them." Morning.
So, as the regiments brigades were moving across the field, there was a news correspondent here by the name of Gregory DeFontaine, and he was quoted as saying it was a spectacle worth a man's life. I'm sorry, a spectacle worth years of man's life to witness.
Attention, company. Shoulder, arms. Right, face. Forward, march. Left arm, left. Left.
Okay, folks, we're going to follow in the wake of the men, and we're going to talk about their assault. They give those scouts, they're coming up the hills, moving forward toward those Union troops on top of the ridge. On top of the hill. Talk about their appearance. Another thing that kind of makes them stand out on the field here, causes some of the confusion for the Union troops up here initially, is what they're carrying as a flag. Everybody recognizes that today as a Confederate flag. But for the Army of Tennessee, this was a rare sight at this point. Most of the Confederate Army here carried very different types of flags than what we today recognize as Confederate flags. The Army of Tennessee would not adopt that pattern until the beginning of the Atlanta campaign the following year. Blue flags is like this. Blue flags with a red cross and white stars. It's a whole just variety. Blue flags with white crosses, red corners. There's many different styles. Also, as far as confused about the uniforms, one of the uniforms is not necessarily getting shot at by their own men, but Union soldiers see them, mistake them for their own troops, and don't shoot at them. That's how they carried this hilltop we just passed.